So I'm aware that I'm pushing up against the coffee break, so I will try and keep this to time. But before I start with the talk properly, I just wanted to share an anecdote from a favorite author of mine called Primo Levi, an Italian writer and chemist. In his collection of stories, The Periodic Table, he talks about a time when he was employed at a varnish factory on the shores of a lake near the northern border of Italy. In the first 2-3 weeks, he had very little to do, but the factory owner then cornered him, took him out into a courtyard, and pointed him at a pile of what were essentially, he said, livers. Now, his job would be to try and recover what was, in fact, an actual batch of varnish that had spoiled. Over the next few weeks, and with extensive experimentation, Levi managed to find out that in the original batch, there had been an excess of something called lead oxide. In addition to that, he also managed to work out that he could recover the varnish by the addition of chromium as a reagent. Now, 30 years later, he was at a dinner with fellow chemists, and an acquaintance began to tell him, in abject horror of his new job, where they were adding chromium to every batch of varnish. Something which was at best pointless, and at worst actually could damage the varnish. That factory happened to be on the shore of a lake, somewhere near the northern border of Italy. It was actually the same factory. Now, I'm not telling you this for no reason, obviously, because a lot of things, especially with brands and with big brands, tend to suffer from the same kind of inertia. At some point in the past, somebody has created a solution to a problem, and that solution tends to exist long after the problem has, in actual fact, stopped being a problem. And that kind of leads me to my next quote, commonly attributed to Bill Gates, but actually traceable back to a Popular Science article from the 1920s, and a guy called Frank Gilbreth, an American politician. Now, the quote, as you might know it, is this one: "I will always choose a lazy person to do a difficult job, because a lazy person will find an easy way to do it." Slightly less eloquent is the article in which the original appears. Most of the chance improvements in human motions that eliminate unnecessary movement and reduce fatigue have been hit upon, Gilbreth thinks, by men who were lazy. So lazy that every needless step counted. Well, cometh the hour, cometh the man. As a child of the 80s and hippie of the 90s, I have tried to live my life in accordance with the fantastic text that is the film The Big Lebowski. Which should hopefully explain why I look like a hippie that's been catapulted through the menswear section of Next. But it turns out that I am the lazy man for this particular task. So I want to carry out a quick test, if you don't mind. So I'm going to ask everybody, if you don't mind, to put your hands up. If everybody could. There we go, fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, at Click Consult, we take approximately, or took approximately 10 to 15 hours every month for our analytics reporting. So I'm going to kind of try and judge the average. If you spend less than 5 hours a month in analytics, if you could lower your hand for me. Less than 10? Okay, and if we're about the average of the room, less than 15? And I'm going to stop there before I start making the remaining people feel very sad. So, I mean, just from a quick scan of the room, we can see that in this venue, we've got thousands of hours of time spent in analytics. And I would guess about 50% of that is spent productively, while the other 50% is going to be scanning between different views, collecting data, downloading various XMLs, and then compiling the actual report. Now, if any of you are anything like me, every single month you will be thinking to yourself, there really must be a better way. And thankfully, otherwise this talk would be remarkably short, there was a better way. And I've got 5 fairly basic steps as to how you can automate that reporting and hopefully earn back 50% of that time. So the first step is to gather your tools. Now, the main kind of reason this came about was because reporting happened to coincide with rapidly approaching deadline for an article for one of the websites I write for. So I decided to devote the time I would normally spend researching the article to seeing whether I could somehow kill 2 birds with 1 stone in true lazy fashion. So I made sure to use free tools only. So this is an option that is available to absolutely every brand. The first tool you'll need is Google Sheets. Obviously, this is the Google version of Microsoft Excel. The second is an add-on for Google Sheets, the aptly named Google Analytics add-on. And the third is Google Data Studio, which is Google's data visualizer. Now, once you have all of these, we look to start at the very beginning, which I am told is a very good place to start. So we have, most of the people in here will have a template or another for reporting, which you can happily follow. But if you're about to embark on a kind of reboot of your reporting methods, it's well worth trying to consider these 2 things. What do you need to measure? And not necessarily in this instance what you want to measure. There are various metrics which, while looking tremendous, don't really actually say a great deal about what you're doing. And what do you want to achieve? And one of the things that often gets kind of missed out when people compile reports is the fact that a lot of reporting is seen by people who don't have as much of an idea about what you do as you do yourself. And so your report really ideally should be designed to explain to someone who really doesn't know what you're doing, how well you're doing it. So once you have that out of the way, and we'll go to here, is the time to set up the reports. Now, this is where you will start to use the add-on plugin. So in your Google Sheets, at the top menu, you will see a section which is add-ons. In there, you'll be able to search for the add-ons plugin, install it, and connect it to your analytics account just using your email address, or the email address to which the analytics account is attached. When you launch this add-on, you will get a little wizard that will pop up, and the little wizard is followed by this box here. So the empty boxes here will give you enough, essentially, to construct a really kind of basic report. So you have the option to name your report, which I will say now, because it's something I found out too late, is to name your reports really distinctively, because when they mount up, and they do, they're really, really difficult to find if you don't name them properly. The second little box there is to start to make sure you're in the right account by selecting the View ID or the Analytics ID. This is found in the Admin section, so you can go into your Analytics, go into the Admin section, and it will give you an ID in there. Obviously, this is more important for places that have more than one analytics account, just to make sure that you get the right one first time. The metrics and dimensions box is actually a searchable function. So all of your analytics metrics and dimensions will be in there named in exactly the same way as they are in your account. So you can search for them, as you know, in your present reports. After you've exited out of the wizard, we have an auto-generated configuration report. And this is where you start to kind of add a little bit of depth to the reports. Obviously, a lot of this is added during the wizard. But then you have things like order, which, to be perfectly honest, didn't do me a great deal of good, because I will explain that I suggest to set up summary reports based on the data that you're pulling through. But this allows you to essentially determine the order in which the data is displayed. Then you have some more data limiting options. There's filters, which allows you to restrict the data especially useful if you're monitoring a specific subfolder, like your blog or a resource section, or a specific form URL, that kind of thing. And then segments, which will allow you to, again, restrict your data, but this time by things like geographical location and demographic, which this formula here does for the UK. Again, limit, not a great deal of use unless you're a large e-commerce site and looking to restrict it to a sample size. And spreadsheet URL, which allows you to export the data externally. And again, I haven't used this because I have decided to have a spreadsheet with 100 separate sheets because that was a smart move. I'm going to give you a couple of kind of really basic kind of reports that you can achieve. Obviously, every brand is going to have a bespoke report that they're going to need to prepare. But just two as a kind of cursory walkthrough. If you're looking at things like session level, your session level reports are going to be your bird's eye view. They're going to give you a kind of broader overlook of the stuff that's going on. For session level, I tend to use a dimension which is date-based. I don't tend to use them in the overall charts, but Data Studio does demand a dimension for your metrics, and date, especially if you're doing a monthly or weekly report, is a useful one to have there. So if you're doing this oversight, you've got things like sessions, which obviously will deliver a count of the total sessions that you've had within the specified date range. You have your users, which represents the number of unique people that have actually completed those sessions. The percentage of new sessions, which can give you a bit of insight as to how well your site's developing, how well you're retaining your audience, what kind of new audience you're earning. Then we have things like average session duration, again, a fairly simple self-descriptive metric. And page views, again, this is just the number of pages viewed during the selecting period. Again, all of these really top-level kind of things, including page views per session, which will, again, give you a bit of insight into how well you're keeping users on your site. So you'll be able to see, roughly how long, where they're kind of how they're enjoying your site, whether they're staying on, whether they're going to different pages from the initial landing page. One of the good ones that you can do through this is goal completions. So you can either monitor a specific goal using the goal completions all, or you can drill down to individual completions and look at how specific forms are doing on the website by using goal XX, where XX is the ID of the goal, again, which you can find in analytics in the admin session. Similarly for page level tends to get a little bit more granular, I think is the current buzzword. So page level, you can kind of drill down a little bit more. I used a dimension which is page title, so it allows me to kind of monitor the performance of a specific page or set of pages. And a lot of the same kind of metrics will go alongside it. You can see how that page is performed in terms of sessions. You can see how many users have completed the sessions, the percent of new sessions. Again, this can, with the page level, can give you some kind of indication occasionally of having missed a keyword. If you're starting to see a lot of new sessions for a specific page, it's worthwhile trying to check in your keyword rankings just to see whether you're not pitching for something that perhaps you should be. And we have, again, session duration, which can give you a clue as to how well your content's performing. Click writes quite a large number of blogs, and they tend to be fairly comprehensive, so you're looking at between 1,500 and 3,000 words on occasion. If someone's landing on those pages and they're only there for 20, 30 seconds, you know that either you've done a really, really, really in-depth opening paragraph or that they're not bothered. Most likely the latter. Then we have, again, page views, which will tell you how many times the page has been viewed. Page views per session, which will give you how many pages, including the specified page, per session. Then we have, again, unique page views, average time on page, which, again, will give you another indication of how well your content's performing. And, again, the goal completions. Now, obviously, again, being kind of brief with this, but if you do need a kind of in-depth view of the metrics and dimensions. This link will be live when we share the slide deck at some point in the next week. Now, step 4 brings me to my next quote, and I hope this gives you some kind of indication. Unlike our previous speaker, Dave, who is enthusiastic and light on his feet and very numbers focused, I, on the other hand, am sloth-like. I am testing the structural integrity of the stage. And I'm very, very much a word person. So the next quote comes from a Portuguese Nobel laureate by the name of José Saramago, who says, "Chaos is merely order waiting to be deciphered." And that made a lot more sense to me when I looked at my 100 badly named individual sheets at start. But essentially, in this case, refers to how you're going to prepare what I've referred to as summary sheets. I'm aware that the middle stage of this is not strictly necessary. You can export your data directly from Analytics to Data Studio, but I grew up with Microsoft Excel. I find the UX of the sheets to be a little bit more pleasing and a lot less confusing. So I create these summary sheets. So I'm going to give you a few basic formula just to kind of give you an idea of how you can kind of organize some of this data. Firstly is the duration. The duration you'll pull from Analytics will make very little sense. As you can see on the left-hand side of that little image, it bears no resemblance to a time. However, if you divide that by 86,400, the number of seconds in a day, and then set the cell to report in time format, you will then get a recognizable time or duration. For reporting period, you can do this kind of manually. If, like me, you really don't want to ever have to return to the sheet once it's done, you can set it to run automatically, and you can do that by setting today's date with the equals today, open and close parenthesis, and then moving on to the other formula there, which I'm not even going to attempt to verbalize, which will give you, firstly, the beginning or first day of the month, and latterly, the last day of the month. The rest of the summaries really take place with SOMIFs, which are just conditional counting, essentially. So the formula is broken down into 3 sections. So you're telling it where you want it to look, what you want it to look for, and what you want it to do after it's looked there. So you can give it, say, for the formula at the bottom, we're looking at things like the total goal completions for social media network LinkedIn. So we tell it to look in main social summary. As you can see, I've inventively titled these sheets. We ask it to look for a text string, which is LinkedIn. You'll notice the asterisks as well as the quotation marks give it the opportunity to look outside of just that specific text string. So it can look for things before and after, if, like LinkedIn, it has multiple referral source URLs. The next step, and probably the easiest step of all, and it was kind of touched on by Lucas earlier on, is to import into Data Studio. And you can do this, as Lucas explained, by creating a new data source, selecting your sheets, and simply clicking Connect. The main benefit of having created the summary sheets and manipulated the data previous to this is that you can then use the wizard to just create quite a wide variety of charts in a matter of moments. So it can really, really help. Now, the results in terms of what we've done internally at Click is that we've managed to condense, well, 49 at the time of writing. I think we're now up to 60 reports into 8 charts, saving an approximate 10 to 15 hours per month, or what's this, 15 full working days per year, in which you can probably check social media. I also met an article deadline, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, and a rebound, killing a third unfortunate bystander bird, in which I got this talk as well. So to summarize, you will need to use 3 tools in addition to your Google Analytics. There is the Google Sheets, Google Analytics add-on for Google Sheets, and Data Studio. You'll need to have a clear idea of what you want your report to do and what you want it to communicate. You'll need to make sure that you're collecting the right data, avoiding vanity metrics. You'll need to use your summary sheets, SUMIFs, and various other formula to manipulate the data, and then simply import the data via data source into Data Studio. And 6th, and my favorite of the lot, is obviously be lazy, and I will add within reason because my boss is here. Because if we find ourselves at the end of every month wondering why we're doing something like we're doing it, then there must be a fairly good argument that you shouldn't be doing it the way that you're doing it. And if we all take steps to be that little bit extra lazy, then we can be assured that the dude abides. Well, thank you very much for listening. These are the social media profiles and things and my various kind of articles that are suitable for work. My Twitter has been banned from sharing at these kind of events. But thank you very much.